Hi there, and welcome to the second edition of Data with Daniel. In the upcoming monthly entries in this video series, we will be digging much more in depth into specific data points and questions regarding the network data. If you saw our first video, you recall the reason we kind of started this is because in November 2019, as it was going along, we quickly realized it was going to be our busiest month of all time, and we figured we needed a way to shine more light on this, the volume of usage as well as any causes or particular trends that we might see in the data. So primary focus today is going to be December 2019 usage as well as the calendar year 2019 overall. So in December 2019 we served 19,613 unique individuals. The good news about that is that it was down over November 2019, which, as you recall, November is always our busiest month. The bad news is that that was still about an 11% increase over December of 2018. That 11% mark puts us a little bit above the monthly usage increase that we were seeing throughout the calendar year in 2019 as compared to the previous year. Of the December total, 6.1% of all individuals we served were visiting a DMARC food pantry for the first time ever. And then of that total we saw in November as well, 34.1% of everybody we served were minors, were 0 to 17 years old. And then in fact 76% of everybody we served were either minors, below working age, above working age, on disability, or working. So that was 76% of everybody. Calendar year 2019, we ended up assisting 55,745 unique individuals, which represented about an 8.5% increase over the previous calendar year. During 2019, of all the individuals we assisted, the average number of pantry visits was 4.1. So 4.1 average months out of the entire calendar year people were utilizing the food pantry. Of that total, we actually saw 16,636 unique individuals, or roughly about 29.8% of everybody we saw in the network only used the network one time. So 1 month out of the entire calendar year. To contrast that, we saw about 2,328 individuals, or 4.2% of the network used the pantries all 12 out of 12 months. So as I said, November 2019 was our busiest month of all time. In fact, looking historically, the 10 busiest days the DMARC network has ever seen, 8 of them came in calendar year 2019, and in fact 4 of those came in November alone, November 2019. Oddly enough, our busiest single day ever was early September 2019, and kind of frightened us a little bit because our second busiest day we had ever seen was actually very recently, January 2nd of 2020, just last week. Looking forward into January 2020 data is going to be a little bit of an oddity as compared to January 2019. Part of the reason it's obviously we're seeing the usage increase as we go, so we're going to see an increase over January 2019 already. But there is going to be another bit of an anomaly, which I'll discuss here, which is if we kind of come over to the graph here. What you're looking at is January 2019 and January 2018, and as you can see, there was actually a decrease. January 2019 was slower than the previous year. The reason for this, and what you're looking at here, is a visual representation of the government shutdown that happened. There were concerns that the SNAP, the food assistance funds, were not going to be able to be sent out in February in 2019. So what they did was actually front load. They actually sent out, they distributed the funds for February in January. So what ended up happening was a lot of people had extra money in January, so what we saw in the network was an actual decrease. Then in February 2019, we saw this massive spike, nearly 20% increase over the previous year, because suddenly then those funds were gone. So it's kind of interesting that looking at our graphs, you can actually see the government shutdown in just our food pantry usage alone. So again, like I said, January 2020, we're going to be seeing an increase already. And what we're stacking it up next to is January 2019, which is sort of artificially lowered by this SNAP issue, this government shutdown that we saw. The SNAP issue, food assistance as it's called in Iowa, is something we're constantly looking at because we are actually seeing dipping usage in the network. We're down to about 51% of everybody we assist gets food assistance, gets SNAP. We'll be discussing that much more in depth in coming videos. The good thing about the data we have, the graphs and everything that we're able to do with this is we're able to discuss with elected officials, with community leaders, with a lot of different people about hard figures, visual representations of data, facts, solid figures about how these things can affect the food pantry network, the usage that we see that, like I said, just that 1 month that we can see this dramatic decrease or increase if there's a policy change. So we're able to discuss those much more in depth. So in the upcoming video, in the next entry in this series, we will be discussing SNAP, food assistance, much more in depth, the decreases that we've been seeing, why we're concerned about that as it affects our network, and then of course delving into potential policy changes that are going to be kind of on the table for the upcoming session. If you have any questions about this particular video, feel free to leave a comment. Feel free to email me at the email that's listed. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching.